Hey everyone, and welcome. Today, we're diving into a piece of English grammar that, let's be honest, can be a little bit tricky, even for native speakers. We're talking about reflexive pronouns. Words like myself and themselves. They seem pretty simple on the surface, but the rules can be surprisingly specific. So today, we're going to master them together. So, have you ever stopped to wonder about this? You tell a friend, enjoy yourself at a party, and it sounds totally normal, right? But what if you said, relax yourself? It sounds a little off, doesn't it? Well, that's a fantastic question, and I promise, by the end of this explainer, you are going to know exactly why that is. Okay, first things first. Before we can really get into the rules of the game, we need to meet the players. Let's get to know the actual words we're dealing with. And here they are. This is our cast of characters for today. There are only 8 of them, which is nice and manageable. You've got the singular ones, myself, yourself, himself, herself, and itself. And then you have the plurals, ourselves, yourselves, and themselves. These are the words we're going to be working with. All right, let's get into the most important rule of them all. I like to call this the mirror rule. Just imagine that the action in a sentence is like a ball. Sometimes, when you throw that ball, it comes right back and hits you. That's kind of what's happening here. So here's the more official way to put it. We use a reflexive pronoun when the person doing the action, we call that the subject, is the very same person who's receiving the action. That's the object. The action literally reflects back, just like looking in a mirror. Let's look at an example. She cut herself chopping the onions. So let's break it down. Who did the cutting? She did. And who got cut? She did. See? The doer and the receiver are the exact same person. So we use the reflexive pronoun herself. I mean, it would sound really weird to say she cut she, right? And here is another classic example you've probably heard 1,000 times. We really enjoyed ourselves at the party. The subject is we. Who did we enjoy? Well, ourselves. The action of enjoying is bouncing right back onto the group, which makes this a perfect use of that mirror rule. And the mirror rule doesn't just work with verbs. It also applies after prepositions, words like of, for, or by. Take this sentence. He should be proud of himself. The pronoun himself points right back to the subject, he. He's the one feeling proud, and he's also the reason for that pride. So we know these pronouns can reflect an action back to the person doing it. But that is not their only superpower. They can also act like a spotlight, adding some real power and emphasis to show exactly who did something. For example, when you say, I will talk to Anna myself, what you're really saying is, I am going to be the one to do this. Not you, not anyone else, me. It adds this layer of personal responsibility. You could just say, I will talk to Anna, but adding myself just gives it that extra punch. Okay, now this is a really important one to get right. Let's look at the crucial difference between using a pronoun for emphasis and using it to mean alone. If you say, I fixed it myself, that's for emphasis. I was the one who did the work. But if you say, I went to the movies by myself, that means you went alone. That one tiny word, by, completely flips the meaning. All right, this next part is super important, especially if your first language has different rules for this. We're going to look at some very common traps that a lot of people fall into when they're using these pronouns. Just take a look at this. In a lot of other languages, you might say something that translates to hurry yourself. But in English, we just don't do that. The action of hurrying is already something you do to yourself. So adding the pronoun is, well, it's just not needed. It's the same thing for a verb like concentrate. And this list really drives the point home. These are some of the most common verbs that we just don't use with a reflexive pronoun in English. And guess what? This brings us right back to that question from the beginning. The reason relax yourself sounds strange is because relax is one of these verbs. It already implies the action is directed at you. Okay, we are almost there. There's just one final piece of this puzzle that we need to click into place. How is a word like themselves different from a phrase like each other? Let's find out. This is where something called reciprocal pronouns come in. Words like each other or one another are for a two-way action. It's not an action bouncing back like a mirror. It's more like an action being exchanged, like a game of catch between two people. Now look at how this plays out here. It makes it so clear. If you say, they blame themselves, that means each person is blaming themselves individually. Person A is blaming person A, and person B is blaming person B. But if you say they blame each other, that's a totally different story. That means person A is blaming B and person B is blaming A. It's a completely different situation, all because of that tiny change in wording. So let's wrap this all up. I know we covered a lot, but it really boils down to three main ideas. First, you've got the mirror rule. Use it when the action bounces back on the subject. Second, the emphasis rule. Use it like a spotlight to stress who did the action. And third, don't forget to use them after prepositions when they refer back to that subject. And that's really it. So here's a final thought to take with you today. Just think about your day so far. Did you teach yourself something new? Did you make yourself some lunch? When could you have used a reflexive pronoun to talk about your own actions? Give it some thought. Thanks so much for joining me.